Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a brand new episode of the Master Your Mental podcast. I cannot wait to dive into the many meanings behind this week's episode titled Conquer the Master Within. I am bringing on a special guest to not only share his personal story as it relates to this topic, but the lessons that helped him grow to add value for all of you guys. Paul Henderson is the Dean of Students at a private school in Richmond, Virginia, author of Slave No More, Conquering the Master Within, and creator of the blog Fatherhood on the Fly, where he shares inspiration to fathers on a variety of important topics. I'm so excited for you all to hear Paul's story today, along with the many pieces of advice he will offer as well. So without further ado, welcome Paul to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Paris. I'm so excited. I'm so glad that you had me, and I'm excited to get into these topics. Absolutely.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you as well because you guys, before we got into the episode, I got a message from Paul on this awesome app. We connected, and he has so much value, and I can't wait. I'm not going to say too much about it because I want him to tell you all about it. So if you could just, I'd love if you can tell me the number one thing in this world right now that lights you up like no other.
Absolutely. The number one thing in this world that lights me up like none other is my family.
Yeah.
Simply put, my family. I'm married to my beautiful bride, Kiera. We've been married for 10 years now, and it's flown by so quickly.
Amazing.
And we have four boys, ages 9, 7, almost 5, and almost 2 years old. So we're busy around here.
Oh,
We're busy around here. So the reason I say my family is because yes, I'm an author. Yes, I'm the dean of students at a school. But at the end of the day, what's it all worth if I'm not there and if I'm not present with my family? So that's something I'm passionate about. I'm not definitely not perfect at it, but if I can be successful with my family, I think that's the number one thing I
oh
can
my
do.
gosh. I
Absolutely.
love that so much. And I was on your website. Your kids are so beautiful, so cute. And I love that. I love that. And that's such a good, that's such a great response because I feel like you're so right. At the end of the day, we have all these things that, we do and we contribute to, but what are we doing it for? What is this passion that's burning inside you to make you do this? And of course, your family, who you go home to, your wife, your kids, and creating these memories and
Right.
having that. And like you said, being present and being there in the moment and just really engaging with them. I love that so much. And that just brings me to another thing that I would love. I'm gonna super would love to get into this with you, but what does this mean to you? So when you think of conquering the master within you, what comes to mind?
Absolutely. And you mentioned the title of my book, Slave No More, Conquering the Master Within. Um, I was very intentional about having that subtitle of Conquering the Master Within because, obviously you hear the word slave, your mind can go to so many different places. Say if you're a Christian, for example, you may go to the Bible and Exodus and how the Hebrews were enslaved in Egypt, or if you're African American or Black like me, you might go to the beginnings of this country, or your mind can go so many different places, when you hear the word slavery. But I wanted to be sure that we were understood. I was talking more so about a mentality. I was more so talking about being in the book more so explores being enslaved to your past life circumstances,
Mm,
whether it's a past failure, or whether it's something that you had no control over, because sometimes we're in situations that we can't control. But what happens is we may not be able to control the past situation, but we can control our response to it.
mm-hmm.
When I think about the master within, I think about that thing that's, that thing or that item or that idea that we've become subservient to, right? And I try my best, and specifically in chapter 3 of my book, I tried my best through to explain it through the characters because it's actually an inspirational fiction book. To be sure that
Wow.
we're clear, whether it's something that may have been said to us or something that may have been done to us. That's the master within that we're talking about.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. And especially when you touch on that point of, right, the difference between situations that we were in or that happened that we can't control or can't go back to the past. But I love how you bring up the response to that, right? That we have the power of how we respond
Right.
and versus how we react and what we do moving forward, which is so powerful because what that does, when I first think about that, when I first think about, what does that look like, right? To be, in a situation where these things are happening and coming at you and you feel so helpless and like you can't stop this and you can't control it. But your response is, and that's powerful because what that does, when I think about it, is it starts to restore hope back into people who feel like they've lost it. When you start to feel very hopeless. And,
Right.
I was reading like a little bit about your story and you were talking about, in 2017, going through a period of losing your job and just struggling so much because, you're about to have your third child and I really love and appreciate that because when people are so open and so vulnerable about these experiences they've had in their life, like it just makes everything so much more valuable to like hear from that. So like I would love to ask you too, especially with the book and all the stories and messages you share inside of it, like how did writing your book help you overcome challenges that you faced in your life previously?
Wow, wow, thank you. That is such a great question. That's such a great question. So if we back up a little bit, I was a student athlete at Virginia Commonwealth University, and then I got my master's in teaching there. So while I was there, I got involved with a group called the Fellowship of Christian Athletes. So in my bio, you see the former sports chaplain. That's where that work comes from. I was working with athletes and coaches from the middle school, high school, collegiate level, all the way up to the NFL level. So after graduating, I actually, went into FCA. I did that for 8 years, for 8 years, and shortly after that, when I realized it was time to step away, I got into teaching. Now this
Mm-hmm.
was 2016, July 2016. I said, it's time to make a change. In August 2016, I officially left FCA and I got into teaching, which was my career passion. Now, during this time, I was going through some life challenges. I was
Mm-hmm.
really going through some life challenges. My wife and I have been married for about 5 years, and we had some bumps in the road. We really did have some bumps in the road there, uh, and then on top of having those bumps in the road and working through some of those things, what ended up happening was 5 months into it. I realized that the campus that I'm on is closing down because of
Mm-hmm.
different issues with the school that I was teaching at. So they had 4 campuses. They only kept 3 open. Mine was shut down. All of a sudden, I'm without a job. My wife's pregnant. We have 2 children, one on the way. So what happened was during that time of being laid off, I was really dealing with, man, I was dealing with the feeling of failure.
Mm-hmm.
We had bumps in the road, and I definitely take ownership over some of the things that my wife and I were going through. I was like, man, I feel like I'm failing. I'm failing my marriage. I feel like I'm failing in my profession. I just left a job that I love that I did for 8 years. I felt like I had some failures there. So all of these thoughts of failure, I felt like they were overtaking me. But it's something about a mentor. And the main character in this book, his name is Bobby. And what he goes through a journey. And what happens is through the book, a mentor is teaching him lessons, and he's introducing him to significant individuals based on people that I actually know. And what happens is through those stories, he's finding life, he's finding purpose, he's finding a sense of value. That happened to me. I interviewed all of these people during that time of being laid off. And guess what?
Wow.
That's when I wrote the book. I
Oh my
wrote the
gosh.
book while I was laid off because after a while, there were certain people that said, Paul, your life has value. Paul, your life has purpose. And I knew I wanted to write, but I'm like, am I worthy to write something? I feel like I'm going through so much right now.
Mm-hmm.
Am I worthy to write something? And there
Mm-hmm.
were people who came to me and said, Paul, yes, you're worthy. Paul, you're still gifted. Yes, you've had some bumps in the road, but it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond. I
Mm-hmm.
chose to get back up. And in the process of getting back up, I realized that I had a message to share as well. And hence the title of my book, Slave No
Oh,
More,
I love it.
Conquering the Master Within.
I love it so much. And see, that is so incredible to me that like, especially when you mentioned, having this mindset and like really like dealing with that, internalizing this failure and having all this stuff that you're dealing with, like losing the job, like having two kids and your wife and another baby on the way, and then dealing with all that. But that's amazing to me that you took that and you did something about it. You turned it into a story that people can take and say, okay, let me read Paul's story, let me see the lessons in his story, instead of using the time, of course, like being laid off from your job. You could have continue just to wallow in it and say, this sucks, this is terrible, this, I can't control this, and just continue to spiral down that. But that is so amazing to me. Like, I would love to ask you, like, what was it inside of you that pushed you to create this story, and how did you do that, faced with all these challenges? Like, how were you able to do that? Was there one thing that pushed you, or like what was it that made you think, I need to do this, I need to use this time to write the story and publish this?
Right. Okay. That's a great question. So during that time, I always knew that I wanted to write. I always knew that I wanted to write, and but I didn't know how it would come out. I had an idea. I actually had the title already, "Slave No More," but I didn't have the conquering the master within part.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I was like, okay, I have these stories, these people who have already said yes, you can use my story, but I didn't have a plan. I remember just going to an event, a local event here, and a guy who I looked up to, was a mentor in my life. He had come to town from Charlotte, and he actually told me that night. He said, "Paul, there's some things you have in you." He said, there are potential businesses you could start, nonprofits. There are things that are in you that during this season, perhaps it's time to get it going." And I remember thinking this was April of 2017, and that night is when I started writing the
Wow.
first words of my book. Bobby was frustrated,
Oh.
and I remember just writing, and my wife is nursing our newborn. He's about a month old at the time. And I would just read her, "Hey, look at what I have here. Look at what I have here." And all of a sudden, what I thought would just be a general self-help book, it turned into this inspirational fiction story, um,
Wow.
of, um, of just overcoming and overcoming. But it took for somebody, a mentor in my life, to say, "Paul, you're going through a rough patch right now, but I see more. What can you actually do with this time where you don't have the stress and the pressures of a job, just overtaking you?" So yeah, April
Wow.
5th, 2017, I'll never forget it.
That is so powerful. And that is amazing. Is I hear this echoed through so many conversations, the power of a mentor, and the power that other people's words have over you, because sometimes that's all it takes to push you to do something, right? Like, we probably have these thoughts inside of us, like, oh, like I would love to, write my story one day, but I don't know, I'm not sure. And then after having, like you said, people coming to you and saying, you have this inside of you, and like over and over and over again, eventually you're like, you know what? This is true. Like, I'm going to do this. No more waiting, no more hesitating. And that's amazing because, not a lot of people have that. Not a lot of people have that person in their life who, they see as a mentor, or, can guide them in that direction. So that is incredible. And I think that's amazing and so powerful. And that leads me to, something that I would really, want to get into, because I think you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I would love to ask you if there was, one certain powerful life experience that you've ever had. And in that life experience, if it's taught you a lesson, what is that lesson? And why are you glad that you learned that?
Right. I think I would go back to that time being laid off.
Mm-hmm.
To put it in perspective, I left FCA at the time. I was really struggling with some fundraising. Just being transparent. I was really struggling with some fundraising because, yes, as much as I enjoyed the ministry part and speaking on the different campuses and this school coming to speak to you and this team saying, "Hey, Paul, can you come speak?" The reality is it was a self-funded position, so
Mm-hmm.
you had to go out there and raise your own support, and that's how my family was taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
So I left there. I wasn't necessarily at the highest point when I left there when it came to that aspect of the job. And then going through some challenges, some bumps in the road. with my marriage. And then you look at the teaching thing. I mean, I'm like, I finally get into teaching. That's what I have my master's in, and I teach for $5 and the school is shut down.
Mhm.
What I learned is, in every adversity, and I heard this before. I heard this before, and I read this before, but it really stuck with me during this time. In every adversity lies a seed of equal or greater benefit if you have a
Mm.
positive attitude. So it's one thing to hear a quote like that, but when you're in it, I tell you,
Mhm.
I mean, it was probably about a 10-month period where I was in it. I feel like I was just really humbled. I felt like I was at one of the lowest points of my life. But it's amazing what happens in a lowest point. It's almost like a seed. A seed has to die in order for it to produce fruit. So
Mhm.
I felt like there was a seed here, and I was in a process of quote unquote dying. More fruit was coming out. So a culmination of that time period between 2016 and 2017 really played that role and helped me to
Wow.
get to where I am now.
That's incredible just to hear, like, like you get into the details of it and like share more about the background that, cuz so many, you don't that's the thing is it's you don't know how other people would respond, in that situation, but you chose to see the positive and see the good and see, what can I add here, right? Like what like parts from my story can I add and put into a book and create something that people can literally take and read and engage with and say, wow, like I resonate with this. I relate with this. I feel what this person is feeling right now. And it's like, and that's the beautiful thing is you're taking something so terrible and overwhelming and painful and stressful, if you can only imagine, for me, like I don't have kids yet or right now, but I can't imagine, having, two kids and, having another one on the way. And then, having this job, and especially you're so excited, right? Like you just transition out of this career for 8 years and you finally got into teaching, you really want to do this. And, then it goes away and then you lose that and you're like, oh man, like, like, and you're feeling all these things, but you chose to, like you said, take that lesson from that seed and plant it and water it and let it grow and turn into something beautiful, and which is your story. And I absolutely love that because, when you think about that, when I read that title, Slave No More, Conquering the Master Within, that's so beautiful to me because when you think about it, okay, when you're like the master within, that gives the illusion, right? That we all have this person. We all have this person inside of us who is capable of more than we think that we are, and I feel like you can probably speak to this. Like, I'd love to get your take on this too about, when it comes to limiting beliefs, right? When we're trying to work on ourselves and, get better and move forward and we're faced with these obstacles, what has been the most helpful for you in overcoming some of those limiting beliefs?
Wow. And this is a topic I could go on for a long time. So I'm going to do my best because so much, even if you read some of the descriptions of my book, that's one of the things we talk about is limiting beliefs.
Mhm.
And throughout the storyline, you see how different individuals overcame different things that contributed to them having limiting beliefs. But one of the biggest things that's helped me contribute to have a limited belief is the same thing that helped Bobby in the book. It's having mentors,
Mm.
having having someone who can look at you and see more in you than you see in yourself. I remember I was just going through something personal one day, and I called a friend of mine, Roger, and I said, "Man, Roger, I'm dealing with this thing here. This is what I'm struggling with. I really want to get better, so on and so forth." And it's amazing because as a dean of students, I have an opportunity to pour into a lot of people, whether it's the students in the school, it's about 175 schools, it's a small school, about 175 kids, or the teachers, because I have a few teachers that report to me as well. I have an opportunity to speak life into them and say, "Hey, you're a champion, you're a champion, you're a champion." But there comes a point in time where I need to hear that myself. And I
Mhm.
remember that night I was talking to Roger, and I said, "Roger, I'm struggling right now. I'm going through my own personal battles right now." And he said, "Paul, I want you to get to a point where you believe that you're a champion." And
Wow.
parents, I tell you what, the night before, I was telling my son the same thing. And here, someone from the outside, a mentor in my life, is saying, "Paul, you're a champion."
Wow.
I needed to hear that. I needed to hear that. So what happened is when he told me that I was a champion, it really helped me to shift my mindset from this thing that's overcoming me to hey, I can overcome this obstacle. You
Mm,
see, you can either look as an obstacle as an unconquerable wall, as a barrier, or you can look as an obstacle at the obstacle as an opportunity to climb over, to get stronger because you've learned how to overcome. And here's the
wow.
thing: when you overcome, you're a little bit stronger, right? You're able to reach back and help someone else overcome the same
Oh
obstacle.
my gosh. That's amazing. Just like that whole outlook on that, because that you're so right. You're so right. You can either see an obstacle, right, as something that is completely, you cannot get through that. You cannot break through that. That's the way it is. It has to stay there, can't move. Or you can see that, like you said, an opportunity for growth, an opportunity for something to teach you a lesson. Like, hey, this at this point in my life, I had this really hard thing, but hey, this is what I did to get through it. So again, so exactly what we're talking about here with this whole concept of, breaking these limiting beliefs, having these personal struggles, these experiences, these things that we saw as failures in our past, and how can we reframe that in a way that helps us move forward. And then also, like you said, add value to others, like what you're doing, and with being the dean of students and pouring into your students, pouring into the teachers, and constantly giving them that reassurance is so powerful. Because just like you said, and I can relate to this as well, we all have that inner critic sometimes where, and that's what is also pretty unbelievable, because, there's of course like people we might see right on the internet and be
Right.
like, oh my gosh, like this
Mhm.
person's amazing, like the most inspiring person in the world. They probably don't think like this or have these moments, but that's the
Mhm.
thing, is everyone has certain moments where they feel like this. And then when you're able to pour into people, that causes them to have this more belief in them, and also makes you feel good as well, because you're encouraging them, you're pushing them. So I love that so much. And honestly, like another thing that I really want to ask you is, I love asking everybody this question, because everyone always has a different answer and it's so amazing. And I love seeing what people say. So I would love to ask you, Paul. So right now, currently in this moment, what are you currently doing to master your mental?
The number one thing that I'm doing to master my mental is, quite honestly, um, and this is part of my personal belief, if you will. I'm remembering that God is bigger than all of my problems.
Mm,
For me, that's just part of my personal belief, that I can either magnify my problems or make them bigger, or I can say, you know what, God is bigger than all of my problems. And that comes from my personal belief. I mean, I'm a Christian. That's part of my where I come from. It's like I could either look at this and say this is what's really big, or I can say, you know what, God, you're really big. And
yeah.
when I remember that, it helps me to remember that everything that's in front of me, I'm able to win. I'm able to conquer. And every failure that I've had, I can always learn from it. So what happens is that failure actually turns into the victory, because when you learn from the failure, you're still winning. You're winning when you
Hmm.
learn, take the lessons from it, and you apply it to the next situation. You're actually winning. So was it
Yes.
really a failure?
Yes. Oh my gosh. I love that. That is so amazing, especially when you talk about, like, compare that to problems, right? God is always bigger than any problem that you will ever face, that you've ever faced. That really helps put things in perspective, because, when we have these experiences, and like you said, when you're in that moment, you're literally in it right now, living it, it can be challenging to say, am I ever going to come out of this? Like, what is it going to look like? Is it possible? But when you have that thing, right, which is your faith that you can go back to and constantly grow and pour into and take value from, and then give that to others, that really does change that view. And it's amazing, like, what it does, because, if you didn't have that view or didn't have that, your problems would seem,
Mm.
very like impossible to come out of. And like you said, if you can take the lessons from them and pull that out and say, okay, I might have seen this as a failure. And that's what I love, the outlook you have and the perspective you have on failure, because, it's almost so common, like growing up, like when you're in school and you fail a test, to
Mhm.
be, this is so bad. I don't want to fail. I want to get an A. I want to, succeed at this. But if you can look at that and, turn back and say, what did I do wrong? Like, what can I fix? Like, what can I work on to get better? you are winning because you're taking that value. And yes, there might be certain people who might, say, okay, well, to me, that's still kind of a failure. But, you're always, that's the thing, is you're always going to have people who see things differently than you see it. All that matters is you see the value in what you're
Right.
doing, and you keep moving forward and making momentum. And that's exactly what you're doing. And I love it so much. And honestly, like, that is so cool. Your story is amazing. I love that. Thank you. Honestly, thank you so much for, taking the time to come out here on the podcast and just share this, share your experiences, share your tips, share your tricks, share, the low moments you had and what really helped you come out of that, because
Yeah.
that's what I love. That's the beautiful thing is, we've all had those experiences. We've all had those days where we are so down, but what helps lift us up, what helps us get the courage inside of us to pick our feet up and keep going. So I think that's amazing, Paul. And, tell the people, where can they find more information about you and where can they connect with you further?
Right, right, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, first again, thank you so much for having me and inviting me to your platform. I really appreciate it. I'm honored that you trust me
Of
to share my
course.
story here and to bring value to you. It means a lot to me.
Mhm.
And so you can find me at fatherhood underscore on the fly on Instagram. So that on Instagram, that's fatherhood underscore on the fly. On LinkedIn, it's you just type in the LinkedIn, and then my portion is PA Henderson 2. That's number 2, PA Henderson 2. And then my website is paulanthonyhenderson.com. That's paulanthonyhenderson.com. That's my name.com, right? and
Awesome.
there you'll find links to my book. Basically you can get my book at any online retailer. You can Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target, Walmart, but a lot of people just choose Amazon and Barnes and Noble, or whatever your favorite
Amazing.
book retailer is. You can get my book there.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And you guys definitely connect with Paul. He is amazing, has the best energy, is, you can tell, like, just from this conversation. So yeah, check him out and show him some love and connect further and show him some love and support. And I just want to thank you guys for listening to this episode as always. And whether it is the daytime or nighttime, I hope that you guys have an awesome rest of your day or rest of your night. And I'm going to end it on that note and say bye to you guys and bye to Paul. So thanks for coming on, Paul.
Thank
Bye.
you so much for having me.